What if I told you that everything you've learned about the beginning of civilization might be wrong? That long before Mesopotamia, Egypt, or the Maya, there were people, real people, building massive stone monuments, charting the stars with mathematical precision, and organizing cities that now lie beneath the ocean? This isn't fantasy. It's not just myth. It's a growing body of evidence that suggests antediluvian civilizations were far more advanced than we ever imagined, and that a catastrophic flood may have wiped out not just villages, but an entire chapter of humanity. You've heard of Atlantis, of Noah, maybe even of Manu or Deucalion. But what if those flood myths weren't just symbolic tales of morality, but collective memories of something very real? Something global? Something terrifying? The Great Flood doesn't belong to one culture, it echoes across continents. And with each new discovery, sunken cities, forbidden artifacts, megalithic anomalies, the gap between myth and science shrinks. It's no longer a matter of did it happen, but how much have we forgotten? In this video, you're about to discover 10 shocking facts that challenge the official timeline of human history. You'll see why mainstream archaeology can't ignore these findings forever. And most importantly, you'll walk away with a new understanding of who we really are, and what might be hidden just beneath our feet, or under the rising tides. Ready to unearth what textbooks won't tell you? Then let's dive into the ancient world. Before the flood. Imagine a time so ancient that even history's maps hesitate to trace it. The word antediluvian comes from Latin, *anti*, meaning before, and diluvium, meaning flood. But not just any rainy day, we're talking about the Great Flood, the kind of catastrophic flood that, according to countless traditions, reshaped humanity's path forever. Antediluvian civilizations aren't just old stories. They're puzzles that challenge everything we thought we knew about prehistory. These cultures live in that strange space where myth and science still fight for the final word. To truly grasp what this means, picture the human timeline as a long road. Prehistory is the rocky terrain, the antediluvian world is the dense fog before the pavement begins. These pre-flood cultures lived in a world that was radically different, not just geographically, but in awareness. They left behind clues, fragments now labeled as forbidden archaeology. But if we look closely, those fragments begin to tell a far more advanced story than we've been taught. These ancient peoples are portrayed, for example, in biblical texts, those who lived from Adam to Noah, with absurdly long lifespans, almost mystical abilities, and early knowledge of art, farming, and the stars. They might have built the first megalithic structures, and their achievements sound closer to sci-fi than stone tools. But consider Göbekli Tepe, an enormous megalithic site intentionally buried over 11,000 years ago. How could primitive people build something so aligned, so precise? Antediluvian might not be fiction after all. Ancient writings like the Book of Enoch describe pre-flood societies taught by fallen beings who shared knowledge of astronomy, metallurgy, and agriculture. Sounds like Atlantis, doesn't it? A civilization so advanced, it became legend after vanishing beneath a flood. And here's the twist, this isn't just a Greek tale. From Sumerians to Mayans to Vedic India, flood myths span the globe. That kind of universal mythology doesn't happen by coincidence. When cultures echo the same story, it's time to start listening. Let's talk about the Sumerians. These people carved records of kings who ruled for thousands of years, before the Great Flood. Thousands. Not hundreds. Traditional archaeologists call it symbolic. But what if it's not? Could these pre-flood cultures really have existed with that level of longevity and structure? Considering ancient climate change after the Ice Age, sudden sea level rise could have wiped them out without a trace, leaving only myths in their wake. This opens the door to a powerful idea. What if technically advanced societies existed long before we think civilization began? Lost systems of writing, precision astronomy, complex math. All appearing suddenly in known ancient civilizations, almost as if someone passed them a manual. But who wrote that manual? And why did it vanish after the flood? Perhaps myths are just distorted memories, fragments of ancient advanced societies, remembered through storytelling. So here's the real question, did humanity truly start from scratch after the Great Flood? Or are we simply picking up where a forgotten chapter left off? In the next topic, as we explore flood myths that appear worldwide with uncanny similarity, you'll start to see that these stories might be more connected, and more revealing, than anyone dares to admit. What if I told you that nearly every ancient culture, separated by oceans, mountains, and millennia, shares the same terrifying memory? A world engulfed by water. Whether it's the Epic of Gilgamesh from Mesopotamia, the Tale of Manu in India, or Deucalion in Greece, the same core story repeats: a massive flood, a chosen survivor, and the birth of a new age. That's not a coincidence. It's the kind of pattern that hints at something deeper, maybe even a shared antediluvian trauma echoing through universal mythology. Let's take Mesopotamia, for example. Long before Noah's Ark set sail in biblical tales, the Sumerians spoke of Utnapishtim, warned by the god Enki to build an ark to escape Enlil's wrath. The flood didn't just wash away sinners, it reset civilization. In India, the story of Manu follows the same arc. Warned by a divine fish, Matsya, he constructs a boat and survives the Great Flood. These stories, found in flood myths across the globe, are so parallel it's as if they stem from a single ancestral memory. Even in ancient China, we hear of Yu the Great, who didn't escape the flood but tamed it, building canals, organizing society, and becoming a cultural hero. That's the twist: sometimes the flood wipes the slate clean, and sometimes it's the forge of innovation. Meanwhile, in Greece, Deucalion and Pyrrha ride out Zeus's fury in a wooden chest, eventually repopulating the earth. Across all these narratives, we see one theme: survival, rebirth, and the strange wisdom that follows. A cycle of loss and renewal. So why does this matter? Because these flood myths don't come from random storytelling, they carry fingerprints of possible historical events, like catastrophic floods during rapid ancient climate change. Oral traditions aren't just bedtime stories, they're memory banks. Over generations, they compress complex truths into digestible symbols. Think about it: when children play telephone, details change quickly. But when cultures across continents tell the same myth, that's a signal worth decoding. You might wonder, how did these stories spread so far? Through migration, trade, and perhaps something even deeper: shared human experience. Imagine traders from pre-flood cultures carrying their myths like luggage, spreading them from port to port. Over time, these tales adapted to local flavor but kept the same core ingredients: water, judgment, survival. That myth transmission flow, from regional trauma to global legend, isn't just poetic. It might be archaeological in disguise. There's a psychological layer here too. Floods symbolize more than destruction, they represent emotional cleansing, moral resets, and second chances. In therapy terms, it's catharsis. For ancient societies, it was a metaphor wrapped in real fear. Just as today we fear rising oceans and climate disasters, so did they. These stories are blueprints for coping with the unthinkable. Atlantis, Doggerland, even the Black Sea Deluge Theory, they all carry that same emotional charge: we had something beautiful, and lost it. And just maybe, hidden within those stories, lies the map to something we forgot. A timeline that predates our textbooks. A whisper from Antediluvian civilizations telling us, we were here, and we remember. But is there physical evidence that backs these myths up? In the next topic, we'll dive deep into archaeological and geological clues that may finally bring myth and reality face to face. If flood myths are the stories, then the earth is the book they're written in. And believe it or not, that book is full of pages soaked with water, quite literally. Archaeologists have uncovered flood layers at various ancient sites, including Shurapak in Iraq and Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. These aren't minor puddles we're talking about. These are thick, abrupt layers of silt, clay, and debris, deposited by sudden and powerful floods that interrupted human settlement. Are these traces of the Great Flood? Maybe not globally, but they were catastrophic enough to shape the memory of entire regions. Take Göbekli Tepe, one of the most baffling megalithic structures on Earth. It predates the Egyptian pyramids by over 6,000 years and seems to appear out of nowhere, with advanced architecture, symbolic carvings, and cosmic alignments. Yet, just as mysteriously, it was buried intentionally. Why? Some researchers believe the site was abandoned or preserved right after, or even because of, a major environmental shift. Could this have been a reaction to a regional antediluvian flood? A pre-flood culture bracing for extinction? And then there's the melting ice. Around 8,000 to 6,000 BC, Earth's climate took a sharp turn. As glaciers collapsed and oceans swelled, sea levels rose by nearly 120 meters. Imagine what that would do to coastal settlements, entire villages swallowed in weeks. This wasn't slow erosion, this was sudden drowning. Ancient climate change wasn't just real, it was aggressive. And humans living in that chaos would have remembered it, passed it on, and turned it into legend. That's how myth becomes a fossilized scream of survival. Submerged structures off the coasts of India, Japan, and the Mediterranean also raise eyebrows. These aren't just random rocks. Some are organized in patterns, steps, walls, corridors, suggesting planned design. If these formations were indeed man-made, then who built them? And when? They don't fit neatly into standard timelines. That's why so many researchers and explorers reference forbidden archaeology. It's the evidence that doesn't make it into mainstream textbooks, but refuses to be ignored. Even the Black Sea Deluge Theory has gained traction among geologists. Around 5,600 BC, a breach from the Mediterranean flooded the Black Sea basin with such violence it may have caused mass migration and civilizational collapse. Underwater explorations have revealed what look like shoreline settlements beneath the surface. And wouldn't you know it, some scholars have linked this event to the biblical Great Flood and Noah's Arkansas coincidence? Or another jigsaw piece in the story of antediluvian loss? Another fascinating thread is the sudden leap in technology found in early ancient civilizations. It's as if someone hit a reset button, and when things came back online, humans knew how to build cities, write in cuneiform, and chart the stars. Could this be the inherited knowledge of antediluvian societies? Think about Nabta Playa in Egypt, an ancient astronomical site in the Nubian desert that rivals Stonehenge, yet predates it. These places whisper, not shout, but their message is persistent. So if we have stories, ruins, and geological records all pointing in the same direction, what are we missing? Maybe it's not evidence we lack, but perspective. In the next section, we'll examine the competing theories that attempt to explain these mysteries, and why none of them can quite shut the door on the possibility of a lost world beneath the waves. When scientists dig into ancient soil, they expect to find pottery shards or bone tools, not proof of a world swallowed by water. Yet in sites from Mesopotamia to Anatolia, flood deposits interrupt human layers like sudden pauses in history. These aren't isolated cases. Shuruppak, believed to be the home of Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh, contains clear flood sediment between older and newer habitations. Coincidence? Or does it support the possibility that catastrophic floods helped define the edges between eras, especially the shift from antediluvian to post-flood life? Now, let's talk Doggerland, a landmass once connecting Britain to mainland Europe. During the last ice age, it was a lush, habitable region. But as glaciers melted, the North Sea rose and swallowed it whole. What's left now lies beneath fishing nets and sonar scans, forests, tools, even bones. For many, this is no myth, it's a concrete example of how ancient climate change destroyed entire lost civilizations. Some researchers even speculate that Doggerland was a hub of pre-flood culture, wiped out by one of Earth's last great floods. Meanwhile, underwater ruins near the coast of Japan, such as Yonaguni, continue to baffle scientists. Some see only natural rock formations. Others, like independent researchers and divers, see staircases, platforms, and carvings, evidence of a forgotten ancient advanced society. Here lies the tension between mainstream archaeology and alternative theories. One side demands peer-reviewed consensus, while the other asks a haunting question: what if we're ignoring the most obvious clues because they don't fit our framework? Satellite images have also revealed strange geometric patterns in the Amazon and Sahara, regions once thought devoid of early complexity. Could they be remnants of antediluvian civilizations, once thriving before being erased by floods or desertification? If so, we might have to rewrite more than just a few pages of history. We may need to reconsider how quickly humans organized, built, and understood the stars, long before writing ever reached a clay tablet. Even in the Mediterranean, divers had discovered submerged cities like Pavlopetri in Greece, complete with streets and buildings, dating back to at least 3000 BC. What if these are just the tips of the iceberg? Imagine how many more cities, temples, and records lie beneath the seas, out of reach but not out of mind. The Great Flood didn't just wash away homes, it may have buried a library of forgotten wisdom. And it's not just about what we've found, it's also about what's missing. If antediluvian civilizations truly reached advanced stages, where are their tools, their writing systems, their symbols? Some theorists argue that time, pressure, and water may have disintegrated many of these materials, leaving behind only stone. And stone, as we see with Göbekli Tepe and other megalithic structures, tends to outlast memory itself. Perhaps that's why these sites feel like postcards from a past too ancient to categorize. So the ground tells a story, but it's only half the tale. The rest is found in the patterns, the puzzles, the out-of-place artifacts. Up next, we'll weigh the major theories trying to explain all this, from literalist interpretations of the Great Flood to symbolic myths, from geological upheaval to intellectual legacy. Each path offers a clue, but which one leads us back to the world before the waters came? Trying to explain the Great Flood and the civilizations that came before it is like opening Pandora's box. Once the questions spill out, there's no stuffing them back in. Scholars and seekers alike have proposed various theories, each attempting to frame the antediluvian narrative through a different lens. Some take the literalist path, arguing that a real, global catastrophic flood wiped out ancient advanced societies in a single cataclysm. It's a bold claim, rooted in texts like Genesis and the Epic of Gilgamesh. But does the evidence really support a worldwide deluge? Literalists point to geological scars, synchronized flood myths, and submerged ruins as proof of a singular, devastating event. They see patterns that span the globe, like a fingerprint left by ancient waters. And while mainstream scientists push back, highlighting the lack of uniform flood layers across continents, literalists argue that oral traditions don't survive thousands of years unless they're grounded in truth. For them, the Great Flood is not a parable. It's a memory etched into the earth and the soul of every ancient culture. Then there's the regional model, a theory that suggests multiple massive floods occurred in different parts of the world around the same time, especially during periods of sudden sea level rise caused by ancient climate change. Under this view, pre-flood cultures were localized, yet simultaneously affected by environmental catastrophes. Think of the Black Sea Deluge Theory or the submersion of Doggerland. These weren't the end of the world, but they were certainly the end of a world for those who lived through them. The regional model helps explain why flood myths are so widespread yet so unique to each culture. The flood in Mesopotamia isn't the same as the one in India or the one recalled in Norse mythology. But the emotional DNA, the loss, the rebirth, the divine message, is identical. These narratives could have evolved from shared trauma, carried across generations, shaped by geography and worldview. In that light, Atlantis becomes less a singular island and more a symbol repeated across civilizations, each telling its own version of an antediluvian fall. Next comes the symbolic or mythic interpretation, the view that the Great Flood represents a psychological and spiritual reset, not a literal event. In this frame, water symbolizes transformation, the washing away of corruption, the rebirth of society, the cleansing of the human spirit. It's a compelling idea, especially when you realize how flood myths often involve divine judgment followed by salvation. These stories teach, warn, and inspire. They may not describe real events, but they reflect real emotions and universal fears. Then we have the prehistoric complexity hypothesis. This is where forbidden archaeology and alternative theories shine. It suggests that advanced knowledge, architecture, astronomy, even metaphysics, existed before recorded history, inherited from antediluvian civilizations. The evidence? Megalithic structures, precise celestial alignments, and ancient maps like the Papyri Reis. Mainstream academia demands more concrete proof, but this theory doesn't wait. It asks, how much was lost beneath the Great Flood before we even learned to write? These competing theories each hold a piece of the puzzle, some clash, others overlap, but I'll attempt to answer the same burning question: what really happened before history began? As we dive deeper into diagrams and models in the next topic, we'll visualize these theories and see how they flow, or conflict, with one another. Because sometimes, the best way to understand the past is to see it. Let's zoom in on a truth few are comfortable admitting: every theory about the Great Flood, literal, regional, symbolic, or otherwise, is shaped by worldview. Some need hard data. Others trust in ancestral wisdom. That's why debates between mainstream archaeology and proponents of ancient advanced societies often hit a wall. One side demands carbon dates, the other offers ancient maps, oral traditions, and megalithic structures like Göbekli Tepe. But what if both sides are looking at different parts of the same hidden elephant? Literalists tend to approach antediluvian civilizations as historical facts erased by a catastrophic event. Their strength lies in the consistency of myth and the presence of real-world flood markers. Their weakness? The absence of uniform, global sediment layers. Yet when multiple cultures describe similar great floods in vivid detail, often without contact, it's hard not to at least raise an eyebrow. Is it impossible that myth and sediment are two halves of a forgotten reality? Supporters of the regional flood model anchor their views in geology. For instance, the Black Sea Deluge Theory is backed by underwater topography and sediment analysis. It doesn't scream global apocalypse, but it does suggest a world-altering flood that displaced populations, erased settlements, and triggered migrations. Doggerland, once a thriving land bridge, vanished beneath the sea, its people gone, its stories turned into legend. This model is practical, grounded in ancient climate change, but perhaps too cautious to grasp the full scale of what may have been lost. Symbolic theorists, on the other hand, look inward. They argue that flood myths are psychological reflections, dreams of redemption after chaos. It's a noble approach, and one that aligns with the mythopoetic traditions of many cultures. But even symbolic stories usually start with something real. Fire myths don't exist in icebound cultures. So why do water catastrophes dominate ancient storytelling across climates and continents? Could symbolism be a polished surface hiding deeper truths? Then comes the theory of forgotten genius, the prehistoric complexity hypothesis. Imagine this: humans once possessed immense knowledge, possibly passed down from antediluvian societies. Not aliens, not magic, just people like us, living in harmony with the cosmos and nature. The Great Flood didn't just drown cities. It drowned legacies. The few survivors carried memories, encoded them into symbols, and passed them on. That's why similar megalithic styles appear across continents, not by chance, but by inheritance. The biggest challenge facing all these theories isn't evidence, it's acceptance. Mainstream thought resists radical reinterpretations, but every now and then, a discovery like Göbekli Tepe or the submerged ruins of Pavlopetri cracks the official timeline wide open. These anomalies force us to ask uncomfortable questions. What if pre-flood cultures weren't primitive, but pioneers? What if history, as we know it, is just the sequel to a much older story? To answer that, we need more than debate. We need models, maps, and diagrams that lay it all out, clearly, visually, and without bias. In the next topic, we'll explore these tools, timelines of sea level rise, transmission flowcharts of myths, and the geometry behind submerged ruins. Because sometimes, when words fail, shapes and patterns speak volumes. This is where the connection between ancient climate change and myth formation becomes crystal clear. Flood myths may be poetic, yes, but they could also be coded memories of real, measured events. When you look at Göbekli Tepe's sudden burial or the rapid submergence of Doggerland, the timeline overlaps. These weren't isolated tragedies. They were part of a massive environmental transformation that carved scars into landscapes and legends alike. Let's move from climate to culture. Another helpful tool is the myth transmission flowchart, a way to visualize how a regional flood event becomes a global legend. Imagine this: a flood strikes a prehistoric complexity hub. Survivors migrate. They bring stories. Trade spreads those stories further. Each new region adapts the tale, fitting it into local cosmology. Over time, what began as a shared trauma becomes a universal mythology. Different voices, same echo. Why does this matter? Because it shows how interconnected ancient civilizations may have been, even without global empires or internet cables. Oral tradition was the ancient cloud storage. The more a story was told, the more resilient it became. And the flood story? It stuck around everywhere. From the Andes to the Pacific Islands, the tale of rising waters and chosen survivors became a narrative backbone, rich in moral meaning and historical mystery. Even diagrams of star alignment in early megalithic sites add weight to this. Places like Nabta Playa and Göbekli Tepe weren't just ceremonial, they were cosmic clocks. They tracked solstices, equinoxes, and possibly even celestial catastrophes. If these societies were aware of long-term cycles, climatic or astronomical, it could explain how they anticipated massive shifts like the Great Flood. That turns myth into science, and storytelling into survival strategy. So when someone says, it's just a myth, they might be missing the math. Because the next time we overlay ancient ruins, rising seas, and global myths on a single map, we start to see a pattern too consistent to ignore. And once you see a pattern, you can start asking better questions. That's what we'll do next, by diving into the debates, disagreements, and modern voices reigniting this age-old mystery. Imagine taking a satellite view of human memory. That's what these models and diagrams help us do. They turn scattered myths and ruins into a cohesive visual language. One striking example is how flood narratives cluster near ancient shorelines that would have existed before sea level rise. Overlay these maps with known sites, like Doggerland, Black Sea settlements, and submerged cities in India, and you'll notice something eerie. These aren't just legends whispered by firelight. They're footprints leading to real places under the waves. Another compelling tool is the cultural overlay chart. By placing timelines of ancient civilizations side by side with geological events, we begin to see patterns. Civilizational blooms often follow environmental resets. The Great Flood, then, isn't just an end, it's a strange kind of beginning. Prehistory collapses, and post-flood societies emerge with sudden knowledge, agriculture, calendars, and even laws. It's almost as if something, or someone, preserved antediluvian wisdom and passed it forward. If we take this a step further, flowcharts showing symbolic diffusion help explain how deeper themes, judgment, survival, cosmic cycles, were encoded in flood myths. These themes persist because they resonate universally. They're less about rainfall and more about rebirth. That's the magic of diagramming myth. It separates the surface story from the deeper signal. It helps us understand why these tales keep surfacing, century after century, generation after generation. And then we have architectural models, 3D recreations of megalithic sites using modern software. When we digitally reconstruct places like Göbekli Tepe, we see not randomness, but design. These were not chaotic piles of stone, they were aligned with purpose, likely astronomical. That pushes us closer to the prehistoric complexity theory, where knowledge wasn't lost due to ignorance, but erased by catastrophe. The flood didn't destroy dumb tribes, it erased ancient advanced societies. Even sea-level projection models become archaeological tools. By simulating the topography of the Earth at different stages, we can now unflood coastlines and rediscover probable human habitats. These models have led to underwater surveys, some of which found man-made structures previously thought impossible. That means our real history might still be out there, buried not under dust, but beneath oceans. The deeper we scan, the more human fingerprints we find. One underutilized approach is myth geography mapping. By connecting sacred locations from different cultures, like ziggurats, pyramids, or flood temples, we trace cultural pathways. Were these coincidental? Or was there a deeper, forgotten network of knowledge transmission? The patterns suggest a spiritual cartography, one that might have been born in antediluvian times and preserved through sacred architecture. Suddenly, mythology starts looking more like memory. So, what happens when you take all these models and connect them? You don't just get lines and graphs, you get a hidden history. A story told in symbols, stones, and shorelines. But every story needs a narrator, and in our time, those narrators are researchers, rebels, and thinkers challenging the norm. In the next topic, we'll meet some of them, and explore the modern battle over what really came before the flood. Every generation has its heretics, those brave, or stubborn, enough to question the official version of history. In our time, names like Graham Hancock and Robert Schoch lead the charge. They argue that a forgotten chapter of human civilization lies buried beneath both mud and academia. Their claim? That antediluvian civilizations, not just tribal groups, but ancient advanced societies, flourished before the Great Flood reset everything. And not surprisingly, their ideas are treated with either cult-like admiration or institutional eye rolls. Take Hancock's theory. He believes that pre-flood cultures were global, interconnected, and wiped out by catastrophic floods. He points to sites like Göbekli Tepe, the underwater ruins near Yonaguni, and astronomical alignments at ancient temples. Schoch, meanwhile, links the erosion patterns on the Sphinx to rainfall, suggesting it's far older than Egyptologists claim. Mainstream scholars reject these interpretations, not always with counter-evidence, but often with a shrug. In their eyes, it's all just alternative theory. But here's where it gets interesting. The more our tools improve, satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, undersea drones, the more we find anomalies. Things that don't fit. Artifacts that predate the societies we thought invented them. Stonework too advanced for the time. Layers of city beneath city. The line between forbidden archaeology and accepted fact gets blurrier with every discovery. So the real question becomes, are we rewriting history, or finally reading it correctly? This debate is also philosophical. On one side, we have catastrophism, the idea that sudden, violent events shaped our past. On the other, uniformitarianism, which insists that slow, gradual change is the rule. For centuries, the latter has dominated academia. But if you look at ancient climate change events, melting glaciers, volcanic winters, rapid sea level rise, it becomes hard to deny that Earth occasionally hits the reset button. And when it does, civilizations drown in both water and oblivion. Critics of alternative theories often accuse their proponents of cherry-picking evidence. And yes, sometimes fringe ideas go too far, but dismissing every unexplained ruin or mythological echo as coincidence is equally narrow-minded. Science advances through tension. Every revolution begins as heresy. Remember, plate tectonics was once called outrageous speculation. So were germs. Now, we take them for granted. Perhaps antediluvian societies are next in line. And let's not forget politics. Control of the past is power in the present. Who gets to decide what is real history? Institutions with decades of investment in a specific narrative? Or independent researchers chasing patterns that challenge the status quo? The battle over the Great Flood and lost civilizations is not just academic, it's cultural, even spiritual. Because if we accept that prehistory was more advanced than we thought, we also have to question our current trajectory. So while the experts argue, the ruins remain. The myths don't vanish. And the public, curious, skeptical, inspired, keeps digging, reading, exploring. In the next topic, we'll shift from debates to discoveries. Real-world examples that might just be fragments of the forgotten, proof that what lies beneath the sea and soil could change everything we thought we knew. Every generation has its heretics, those brave, or stubborn, enough to question the official version of history. In our time, names like Graham Hancock and Robert Schoch lead the charge. They argue that a forgotten chapter of human civilization lies buried beneath both mud and academia. Their claim? That antediluvian civilizations, not just tribal groups, but ancient advanced societies, flourished before the Great Flood reset everything. And not surprisingly, their ideas are treated with either cult-like admiration or institutional eye rolls. Take Hancock's theory. He believes that pre-flood cultures were global, interconnected, and wiped out by catastrophic floods. He points to sites like Göbekli Tepe, the underwater ruins near Yonaguni, and astronomical alignments at ancient temples. Schoch, meanwhile, links the erosion patterns on the Sphinx to rainfall, suggesting it's far older than Egyptologists claim. Mainstream scholars reject these interpretations, not always with counter-evidence, but often with a shrug. In their eyes, it's all just alternative theory. But here's where it gets interesting. The more our tools improve, satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, undersea drones, the more we find anomalies. Things that don't fit. Artifacts that predate the societies we thought invented them. Stonework too advanced for the time. Layers of city beneath city. The line between forbidden archaeology and accepted fact gets blurrier with every discovery. So the real question becomes, are we rewriting history, or finally reading it correctly? This debate is also philosophical. On one side, we have catastrophism, the idea that sudden, violent events shaped our past. On the other, uniformitarianism, which insists that slow, gradual change is the rule. For centuries, the latter has dominated academia. But if you look at ancient climate change events, melting glaciers, volcanic winters, rapid sea level rise, it becomes hard to deny that Earth occasionally hits the reset button. And when it does, civilizations drown in both water and oblivion. Critics of alternative theories often accuse their proponents of cherry-picking evidence. And yes, sometimes fringe ideas go too far, but dismissing every unexplained ruin or mythological echo as coincidence is equally narrow-minded. Science advances through tension. Every revolution begins as heresy. Remember, plate tectonics was once called outrageous speculation. So were germs. Now, we take them for granted. Perhaps antediluvian societies are next in line. And let's not forget politics. Control of the past is power in the present. Who gets to decide what is real history? Institutions with decades of investment in a specific narrative? Or independent researchers chasing patterns that challenge the status quo? The battle over the Great Flood and lost civilizations is not just academic, it's cultural, even spiritual. Because if we accept that prehistory was more advanced than we thought, we also have to question our current trajectory. So while the experts argue, the ruins remain. The myths don't vanish. And the public, curious, skeptical, inspired, keeps digging, reading, exploring. In the next topic, we'll shift from debates to discoveries. Real-world examples that might just be fragments of the forgotten, proof that what lies beneath the sea and soil could change everything we thought we knew. Let's start with a land that once existed but now sleeps beneath the sea, Doggerland. This stretch of fertile plains once connected Britain to continental Europe, bustling with life during the Mesolithic era. But as the Ice Age ended, melting glaciers triggered sea level rise that swallowed it whole. Today, fishermen still pull up bones, tools, and even remnants of ancient forests from the seabed. This isn't theory, it's a sunken piece of prehistory that could represent one of the lost antediluvian civilizations. What makes Doggerland so compelling is how perfectly it mirrors flood myths from northern Europe. Legends of drowned kingdoms, of people fleeing the rising waters, echo throughout Celtic and Norse folklore. Some even draw parallels to Atlantis, once a center of knowledge, now forgotten. And while mainstream archaeology treats Doggerland as a geographic event, those studying ancient advanced societies see something more, a civilizational graveyard hidden beneath the North Sea. Now let's look eastward, to the Black Sea Deluge Theory. Around 5600 BC, the Mediterranean Sea is believed to have breached a natural dam and poured into the Black Sea basin with devastating force. The result? A sudden and permanent flood that may have submerged thousands of square kilometers of farmland and settlements. Some researchers believe this event directly inspired the biblical tale of Noah and his ark. In this case, we're not just connecting myth to science, we're watching them merge. Marine geologists exploring the Black Sea have discovered what appear to be ancient shorelines and even man-made structures beneath the water. If confirmed, this would offer direct evidence of pre-flood cultures overwhelmed by sudden catastrophic floods. And let's be honest, if rising seas wiped out a civilization today, we'd likely remember it for thousands of years too. Flood myths might be our ancestors' way of documenting real trauma with the only tools they had, story and symbol. Further east, off the coast of India, lie the ruins of Dwarka, a city once thought to be purely mythological. But underwater surveys have revealed structures aligned in grids, roads, and what appear to be docks, all submerged in the Arabian Sea. In Hindu mythology, Dwarka was the kingdom of Krishna, swallowed by the sea after his departure. Again, we see ancient civilizations once dismissed as legend, now being reconsidered as lost chapters of human history. Similar anomalies appear in the Caribbean, where some divers claim to have found symmetrical stone paths off the coast of Cuba. Though still debated, these formations reignite questions about seafaring prehistoric complexity and the possibility of sunken cities in regions far from Eurasia. Whether or not they're proven to be man-made, their existence challenges our comfort zone. Why do so many ancient ruins lie just beneath the current sea level? It's almost like Earth itself has been hiding a secret. So what does it all mean? These aren't random discoveries, they're puzzle pieces from a time before the Great Flood. And each one adds weight to the idea that we weren't the first to build, to organize, to explore. In the next block, we'll continue exploring these real-world enigmas, and push even further into the underwater archives of our forgotten past. Let's turn our attention to the Mediterranean, where the submerged city of Pavlopetri, Greece, offers yet another glimpse into the antediluvian mystery. This site, resting just beneath shallow waters, reveals streets, courtyards, tombs, and even plumbing systems, dated to at least 3000 BC. The architecture suggests a level of planning and civil engineering not expected in that era. How many more cities like this lie underwater, undiscovered? And what if some of them date back even further, to true pre-flood cultures? Pavlopetri isn't alone. Off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni monument baffles geologists and divers alike. With what appears to be steps, terraces, and sharp-angled corridors, the structure ignites debate. Is it natural, or the work of an ancient advanced society? If man-made, it would push back the timeline of civilization by thousands of years. But even if natural, its discovery inspired global interest in forbidden archaeology, and forced us to reconsider the depth of ancient seafaring knowledge. In Egypt, there's growing speculation about the underwater ruins near Alexandria. Once a vibrant metropolis, parts of it now rest below sea level due to earthquakes and tsunamis. Among the submerged remains are temples, sphinxes, and docks. Here we don't rely on myth, we have direct, visible evidence of a civilization partially consumed by the sea. It reminds us that water doesn't only erase, it preserves. And sometimes, what it protects is more telling than what it destroys. Another key site is Bimini Road in the Bahamas, where a submerged structure resembling a massive, linear pathway has sparked Atlantis-related theories for decades. Though some geologists claim it's a natural formation, others point to tool marks and right angles as proof of human design. The connection to Atlantis is speculative, but it's not the theory that matters, it's the pattern. Why do so many flood myths lead us to submerged ruins? And why are we only now beginning to rediscover them? Even the Americas join the conversation. In Bolivia, Tiwanaku's Puma Punku complex features stones weighing hundreds of tons, cut with a level of precision unmatched by modern tools. Though not underwater, its construction defies the technological expectations of known ancient civilizations. Theories suggest these skills may have originated from an older, forgotten culture, possibly antediluvian, whose knowledge survived the Great Flood in fragments. It's like looking at the ruins of a language we no longer speak. Modern tools are opening new doors. LiDAR, sonar, and satellite imaging allow us to map landscapes once considered impenetrable, revealing roads beneath jungles, cities under deserts, and ruins under waves. Each new discovery pushes back the boundaries of prehistory and challenges our assumptions. The more we find, the more plausible it becomes that pre-flood cultures were real, and that we've only scratched the surface of what they left behind. So we return to the question that started it all: were the myths right? Not in every detail, perhaps, but in their core. In the final topic, we'll explore what ancient texts, mythographers, and modern science together reveal. And how a handful of researchers, explorers, and believers are bringing the antediluvian world back to life, piece by piece. When we reach the limits of archaeology, myth, and geology, where do we turn? We turn to the minds that dare to ask the hard questions. One such figure is Alan Dunda, whose work The Flood Myth takes a deep comparative dive into global flood myths. His analysis reveals something stunning: the consistency of flood narratives across time and culture isn't just mythological, it's psychological. A collective trauma etched into the universal mythology of the human experience. His book is a must-read for anyone chasing the truth hidden in symbolic waters. Then we have Graham Hancock's Magicians of the Gods, a follow-up to his groundbreaking Fingerprints of the Gods. In it, he dives into evidence of an advanced antediluvian civilization destroyed by a catastrophic flood caused by comet impacts and sudden climate upheaval. Whether you agree or not, Hancock's research forces us to reconsider what ancient civilizations were truly capable of. His use of geological data, ancient maps, and unexplained ruins challenges the comfortable timeline of prehistory we've come to accept. Robert Schoch deserves attention too. While others theorize, he tests the stones. Schoch's analysis of the Great Sphinx's water erosion patterns suggests that it predates dynastic Egypt by thousands of years. That would place it squarely in the antediluvian era. His work bridges forbidden archaeology with hard science, and whether or not the academic world embraces it, his data points are difficult to dismiss. Especially when so many myths begin exactly where his conclusions point, before the Great Flood. For those seeking accessible content, there are countless documentaries, podcasts, and channels exploring these mysteries. From ancient architects to bright insight, the digital realm has become a goldmine of alternative theories. These creators often synthesize myth, science, and speculation into digestible formats. While not every claim holds up, the growing community around these ideas proves one thing: people are hungry for the truth. Or at least, a narrative that dares to go deeper than the textbook version. If you're more academically inclined, keep an eye on peer-reviewed geological studies focusing on the Black Sea, the Persian Gulf, and the submerged continental shelves of Southeast Asia. These studies, while cautious, hint at rapid flooding events, drowned settlements, and ancient shorelines. The fact that many of these align with ancient flood accounts only adds to the intrigue. Sometimes, it's not about rewriting science, it's about allowing myth and science to sit at the same table. Another compelling direction is the study of ancient climate change and its cyclical nature. Solar activity, cometary debris, and even Earth's orbital wobble have played roles in sudden shifts throughout history. Could ancient people have known this? Sites like Göbekli Tepe suggest a preoccupation with cosmic cycles. Perhaps they weren't just building temples, they were building warnings. If that's true, then these megalithic structures might be messages meant for us, not just monuments to their gods. So where do we go from here? That depends on whether you're satisfied with stories, or ready to search for buried truths. In the final segment, we'll tie it all together with an introduction that shakes assumptions and a conclusion that dares you to act. Because sometimes, rediscovering the past is the first step toward reimagining the future. For anyone ready to go beyond passive curiosity, fieldwork is a growing frontier. From underwater archaeology in the Mediterranean to ground-penetrating radar projects in Turkey, new discoveries are happening faster than ever. Citizen scientists, divers, drone operators, and even data analysts are joining the hunt. The digital age has democratized exploration. Today, someone in their living room can find anomalies in satellite images that professionals might miss. In this search for antediluvian civilizations, curiosity is now a legitimate research tool. Books alone aren't enough. To truly explore these theories, it helps to cross-reference data, compare myth timelines, sea level charts, and tectonic maps. Tools like Google Earth, LiDAR scans, and open-access archaeology journals offer a treasure chest of resources. Want to investigate the Doggerland hypothesis? Start with marine geology reports. Interested in Göbekli Tepe's orientation? Pull up its latitude and compare it with solstice tracking software. This is how lost civilizations start becoming found, through patterns, not just passions. And let's not forget storytelling. Myth isn't just about belief, it's about memory encoded in symbol. The Epic of Gilgamesh, Manu's flood, Atlantis, the tale of Noah, they're all reminders that something massive happened, something worth retelling. These myths were the documentaries of their time. And if we're willing to see past the metaphor, they may point us straight to the fingerprints of pre-flood cultures. Myth and science are not enemies, they're partners, waiting to be reintroduced. There's also a rising call for interdisciplinary collaboration. Historians, linguists, geologists, and astronomers are finding common ground in unexpected places. New interpretations of ancient texts through AI, dating techniques using ice cores, and underwater scanning via machine learning, this is the frontier of understanding our antediluvian past. It's no longer a matter of belief versus fact. It's about curiosity versus complacency. And the more open the collaboration, the closer we get to cracking the ancient code. Educators are beginning to adapt too. Some universities now offer courses that include comparative mythology with geological and archaeological correlations. Students are asking the big questions, and professors, slowly but surely, are acknowledging that our historical models may be incomplete. The past isn't just something to memorize. It's something to interrogate, to rethink, to rediscover, and perhaps to reconcile with our current world as climate shifts and ancient patterns repeat. If all of this sounds overwhelming, good. Because it means the mystery is alive. The best knowledge isn't delivered, it's discovered. Whether through a flood myth, a submerged ruin, or a diagram no one's drawn yet, the quest continues. Antediluvian civilizations may not return to us in full, but their whispers grow louder with every curious mind willing to listen. And now, with all the evidence laid out, the diagrams explored, and the myths unpacked, it's time to bring the entire journey together. Up next, let's craft an introduction that won't just open a video, but open minds. When we reach the limits of archaeology, myth, and geology, where do we turn? We turn to the minds that dare to ask the hard questions. One such figure is Alan Dunda, whose work The Flood Myth takes a deep comparative dive into global flood myths. His analysis reveals something stunning. The consistency of flood narratives across time and culture isn't just mythological, it's psychological. A collective trauma etched into the universal mythology of the human experience. His book is a must-read for anyone chasing the truth hidden in symbolic waters. Then we have Graham Hancock's Magicians of the Gods, a follow-up to his groundbreaking Fingerprints of the Gods. In it, he dives into evidence of an advanced antediluvian civilization destroyed by a catastrophic flood caused by comet impacts and sudden climate upheaval. Whether you agree or not, Hancock's research forces us to reconsider what ancient civilizations were truly capable of. His use of geological data, ancient maps, and unexplained ruins challenges the comfortable timeline of prehistory we've come to accept. Robert Schoch deserves attention too. While others theorize, he tests the stones. Schoch's analysis of the Great Sphinx's water erosion patterns suggests that it predates dynastic Egypt by thousands of years. That would place it squarely in the antediluvian era. His work bridges forbidden archaeology with hard science, and whether or not the academic world embraces it, his data points are difficult to dismiss. Especially when so many myths begin exactly where his conclusions point, before the Great Flood. For those seeking accessible content, there are countless documentaries, podcasts, and channels exploring these mysteries. From ancient architects to bright insight, the digital realm has become a goldmine of alternative theories. These creators often synthesize myth, science, and speculation into digestible formats. While not every claim holds up, the growing community around these ideas proves one thing: people are hungry for the truth. Or at least, a narrative that dares to go deeper than the textbook version. If you're more academically inclined, keep an eye on peer-reviewed geological studies focusing on the Black Sea, the Persian Gulf, and the submerged continental shelves of Southeast Asia. These studies, while cautious, hint at rapid flooding events, drowned settlements, and ancient shorelines. The fact that many of these align with ancient flood accounts only adds to the intrigue. Sometimes, it's not about rewriting science, it's about allowing myth and science to sit at the same table. Another compelling direction is the study of ancient climate change and its cyclical nature. Solar activity, cometary debris, and even Earth's orbital wobble have played roles in sudden shifts throughout history. Could ancient people have known this? Sites like Göbekli Tepe suggest a preoccupation with cosmic cycles. Perhaps they weren't just building temples, they were building warnings. If that's true, then these megalithic structures might be messages meant for us, not just monuments to their gods. So where do we go from here? That depends on whether you're satisfied with stories, or ready to search for buried truths. In the final segment, we'll tie it all together with an introduction that shakes assumptions and a conclusion that dares you to act. Because sometimes, rediscovering the past is the first step toward reimagining the future. So now that you've seen the evidence, the myths, the ruins, and the theories, what do you believe? Do you still think civilization started just 5,000 years ago with stone tools and lucky guesses? Or do you feel, deep down, that something bigger, something more advanced, came before? That maybe, just maybe, humanity has already reached heights once, only to be erased by the rising tide of the Great Flood? The past isn't set in stone, it's waiting to be reawakened. And now that you know, you can't unsee it. What if we've been digging in the wrong direction this whole time? What if instead of always looking forward for progress, the key lies in what we left behind? If antediluvian civilizations really existed, if they built megalithic structures, charted the stars, and carried wisdom now buried, what else have we lost that could change our future? And more importantly, are we repeating the same mistakes that once led to their fall? Maybe the next flood isn't water. Maybe it's ignorance. So I'll leave you with this: what would you do if you discovered your entire history was a cover-up of something extraordinary? Would you stay silent, or start digging deeper? Let's keep this conversation alive. Share your thoughts in the comments. Which of these 10 shocking facts blew your mind the most? And if you're as fascinated by ancient civilizations, flood myths, and forbidden archaeology as I am, make sure to hit the subscribe button, activate the notification bell, and join us on the next dive into the forgotten chapters of human history. Because this is just the beginning.